What's crack-a-lackin' 2025ers? I've got a review of Nosferatu and Deuce Irae coming up soon, but first I wanted to check out some indie films that you might not have heard of that was released over the last couple of weeks. Let's start binging. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Replicator is new on demand from Cranked Up Films. It's directed by Mark Andrew Hamer and written by Mark Andrew Hamer and Russ Lindway. Brie Noel plays Darby, a headstrong public defender who comes from a troubled past with her father Ron, played by Jim Alexandre, who shows up on her doorstep claiming he needs a place to stay, and oh yeah, he's dying of cancer. Her best friend Nelia, played by Caitlin E. Newberry, wants to be there for Darcy, but has a few dark secrets in her own past getting in the way. When a murder occurs, a sheriff, played by Brian Spangler, and a medical examiner, played by Lejean Woods, discover a strange mishmash of organs in the body, along with a strange pattern made from blood spattered around the crime scene. These two seemingly different stories converge in strange and body-horrific ways. Replicator is a strange movie. Not only does it have a unique monster as its centerpiece with some odd properties in itself, but the way the whole thing is put together is especially wonky. I think the main way I can describe the offset way this script works is that this movie feels more like an episode of Darcy the Headstrong Public Defender than an actual movie. You know how in TV series there's a main plot and then a subplot that usually has something to do with the lead's bigger story? That's what this movie feels like. It feels like the filmmakers were stretching to make the main conflict, the body-stealing monster from another dimension, work with the more personal conflict, Darcy's relationship with her dad, her affair with the sheriff, and her friendship with Neela. All of the plot lines eventually make it to some kind of crossroads, but there's a lot of effort to be made to make it there. There's a subplot of Darcy having a casual affair with the local sheriff who happens to be married. In a TV series, eventually this would go somewhere, most likely with the sheriff's wife finding out and some drama occurring, but we never get there in Replicator, which makes you wonder why that little detail was highlighted in the first place. It feels like character clutter that really has nothing to do with the plot. The same thing happens with a big revelation Neela reveals to Darcy later in the film. There's a whole scene dedicated to this secret, but in the end, whether the secret is revealed or not, or even existed at all, really has nothing to do with the main plot. So why is it there? This dislocated sense to the script is ever present, making me wonder if these little details weren't added much later on to pad the script. This off-kilter way of scripting a standalone movie made it feel unsupported, with characters saying and doing things that made little sense and distracted me from everything else. Replicator is decently acted. Apparently, lead Brie Noel is a Hallmark movie queen, and she does convey the drama decently. Caitlin E. Newberry is decent as well, offering up some okay dramatic scenes, plus she looks pretty good naked. The guys get less screen time or dramatic muscles to flex, though it's fun to see Lejean Woods continue to pop up in genre roles. Woods serves as the comedic relief here, but sometimes his jovial nature conflicts with the drama that's going on in the scene, making him seem aloof and insensitive. The gore is solid. The opening scene has a strange tentacle dissolve an arm clean off with goppy melted skin and blood. This was a nice scene, but ultimately had no context, so it felt like they just threw in an effects shot at the beginning. The rest of the gore is hit and miss. Some of the practical stuff works well, but as soon as CG is used, the integration in with the rest of the live-action stuff is rough. Still, I will give it to Replicator for coming up with a monster with unique characteristics, even though they're more like the creeping unknown stuff you see in a Lovecraftian joint. All in all, it's not a complete waste of time. Replicator has some beautiful and talented leads going for it, and some solid gore and creative ideas. It's just some basic writing fundamentals that feel off, and kind of distracted me from fully supporting it. Listen Carefully is new on demand from Haida Street Films and RBG Films. It's directed and written by Ryan Barton-Grimley. When an overworked assistant bank manager, Andy McNeary, played by filmmaker Ryan Barton-Grimley, babysits his new daughter for the first time while his wife goes out for a night on the town, things get dire when his daughter goes missing and the kidnapper instructs Andy to rob his own bank through the baby monitor or he will never see his daughter again. Listen Carefully is a tense little thriller. The pace is brisk and direct. This is a story about morality, guilt, and desperation, and Andy exemplifies those traits quite well. While Andy might not be the most likable of protagonists, he is sort of walked over by his wife. Same goes for his boss and even the night janitor, never really standing up for himself to them and just sort of rolling with all of the punches. But when the kidnapper calls him on his behavior and even walks all over Andy himself, I felt for Andy's plight and was rooting for him to somehow come away from this nightmare with his family intact. No one wants to be the doormat, though it happens a lot to a whole lot of people, nevertheless, so there is a nice everyman quality to this character. This is a very focused thriller with one big goal in mind for Andy: get the ransom and get his baby back. With the focus solely on Andy for the entire time, the film feels a little like it might have made for a better Twilight Zone episode, as there's no real deviation or cutaway to speak of here. I think a shorter version would have serviced this type of story better. Nothing against Ryan Barton-Grimley as an actor, but his pushoverness and desperation, despite being relatable, makes for a frustrating watch, especially since a lot of Andy's attempts to outsmart the kidnapper are so easily thwarted. It becomes obvious why this is towards the end, and while I saw the finale coming as things begin to get more sideways, I still feel either I wanted to see less torture for Andy or a bigger payoff when he finally does snap. But all of this talk about character really does show that Listen Carefully had my investment, I guess. The creepy baby masked pursuers Andy continually runs into are nice and weird. This one turned out to be a tense little thriller with somewhat of a predictable ending, but the ride there was a wild one. The Soul Eater, aka La MANGEUR d'Âmes, is new on demand from Capelight Pictures. It's directed by Alexandre Bustillo and Julien Maury, and written by Annelyse Batrel, Ludovic Lefebvre, and Alexis Laipsker. A series of violent and strange murders take place in a small French mountain village, drawing in an obsessive detective, Frank de Roland, played by Paul Hamey, and a strict special agent, Elizabeth Gardiano, played by Virginie Leoden, who you might know from The Beach. Both prefer to work alone, but when the body count intensify and the answers continue to elude them, they pair up to solve the case. The only clue that both arrive at is that it involves a local legend called the Soul Eater, which of course eats souls and destroys families. I'll always follow directors Alexandre Bustillo and Julien Maury because of their jaw-dropping and soul-shattering film Inside. But honestly, while there have been a few moments of goodness from the pair of filmmakers with La Vide, Among the Living, and maybe bits of Candisha, I've been more disappointed than impressed with their work since their intense debut. It almost feels like the duo peaked with Inside and never have been able to achieve such intensity since. In The Soul Eater, shock horror is replaced by a police procedural told from the perspective of two different lawmakers in search of a brutal killer. While we see the crime scene and later are made privy to the gruesome acts that went down in flashback, the bulk of The Soul Eater focuses on the professional relationship between de Roland and Gardiano, as both officers are working outside of the local law enforcement and find themselves outcasts among their own while investigating the case. There are very gruesome aspects and possibly paranormal ones at play here, but the interest lies firmly in the detective genre as the cops try to piece together an inexplicable case. The Soul Eater has all of the detective drama cliches going on. There's the witness kid who won't talk, the car chases, the foot chases through the woods, the possible conspiracy from within, and two unlikely partners learning to work together to solve the crime. I'm glad Bustillo and Maury did their homework, but the film forgets to really add anything new to the mix. Now, had The Soul Eater incorporated some of the claustrophobic ultra-violence that we saw in Inside, that would have made for an interesting little detective drama that distinguishes itself from every episode of Remington Steele or Hunter, or any other buddy cop flick that you've seen since the 80s. Instead, it borrows the blueprint of those films and TV shows and plays everything straight and safe. One thing The Soul Eater lacks all the way through is passion. Sure, Agent Gardiano suffered the loss of her child and apparently almost took her own life afterwards, Yes, de Roland is dedicated to catching a killer and seems to have a soft spot for missing children, but never is there a moment in this film that any kind of emotion is let loose. Léoden is buttoned up and proper as Gordiano, the epitome of professionalism, attempting not to crack under the pressure of the case. Hamie is reckless as de Roland, but never really suffers that much, aside from a few bumps and bruises despite tossing himself into the heart of danger. Now, I didn't want the Soul Eater to go Hollywood and have the two lawmakers hook up, but I do think a little sexual tension between the two would have helped make me more invested in the two's pairing, and in turn would have made me care more about the case. I don't know if it was the actors, or the writing, or the directing, or what, but the two leads end up being as passionate as a cup of warm tap water. It feels as if this is Bustillo and Maury's attempt to play it safe and go mainstream with their work. Yes, there are some gruesome details about the murders, but everything is explained to us by a forensics officer, and very little is seen. Instead, we're given a few murder scenes after the fact, a flashback, some very blandly shot action scenes, and a few scenes of a monster that looks rather goofy with its giant triangle head, which reminded me more of the Mac Knight guy than anything remotely scary. The Soul Eater is entirely too long as well. By the hour mark, I was struggling with consciousness and disconnected completely. The film went on for about an hour more. This is a by-the-book detective thriller with not even a whiff of flair or anything else to make it stand out. It's another miss from Bustillo and Maury, but I'll be there next time rooting this filmmaking team on to take back that horror greatness they showed long ago in their feature debut. Drive Back is new on demand from Dark Sky Films. It's directed by Cody Ashford and written by Jon Sarro. A couple, Reed and Olivia, played by Zach Gold and Whit Kunschik, return from their engagement party and are directed to take a shortcut through the woods, which ends up being a never-ending nightmare they cannot escape. While Drive Back has a very familiar premise, very similar to Brightwood, a film that was released a few short months ago, Zach Gold and Whit Kunschik portray very complex characters and are not afraid to be unlikable, as the pressure begins to build and their escape from this endless road seems impossible. Both actors are convincing in their roles, highlighting some very big faults and still managing to make you feel compassionate for them. The pace moves briskly as well. Sure, there's the initial getting to know you moments that are necessary to help orient the viewer with these two characters, but once the weird stuff starts happening, the pace revs up nicely. And while those familiar with this Twilight Zone-esque premise will catch on sooner than most, the film does a decent job of varying the threats and also playing with time and reality enough to make the meat of the movie count. A simple ride down a road can be redundant and tedious, but Drive Back adds in spiders, creepy old ladies, old hermits, and a killer with a knife and a crowbar out for blood. There are moments in Drive Back where the actors do and say some very dumb things. It's one of those things where they are about to be in the clear and then, instead of just doing it, they have to stop and have a heart-to-heart conversation. This happens not once but twice, and while repetition is part of the horror that's going on for these two people, hearing the same speech where they promise to be better to one another is downright redundant. That said, Drive Back is a simple trip where reality takes a holiday and time gets twisted as a barbed wire fence. The actors in peril are strong, making the horror all the more effective, while there really is a dark edge to these two characters, making them downright dislikable at times. I found seeing them drive down this road to hell to be entertaining enough to recommend. Have you seen any of these movies? Are you gonna seek them out? Let me know which ones look good and bad to you down in the comments. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be. Stuck inside your reality, you're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're doomed. You're doomed. Live the life
outside the